There comes a moment in every person's life when they finally grasp that peace isn't something you chase in the world around you. It's something you guard within yourself. And when that realization hits, it changes the way you move through life. You stop seeking validation from others. You stop trying to justify your existence to those who are determined to misunderstand you. You stop negotiating your worth just to make someone else comfortable, because deep down, something shifts. You recognize that your inner peace is too precious to be sacrificed for chaos, disrespect, or emotional drain. Valuing yourself deeply isn't about making noise. It isn't about being arrogant or seeking recognition. It's quiet, subtle, but profoundly powerful. It reveals itself in the things you tolerate and the choices you make about what you walk away from. It shows in how you treat yourself when no one is watching, and in the moments where you could react, argue, or prove your point, but instead you pause, breathe, and choose calm. That decision, simple as it may seem, is strength. It's power. It's self-respect at its most authentic. Many people mistake peace for weakness. They think that if you don't fight, if you don't engage in drama, if you don't raise your voice, you must be scared or submissive. But the truth is far from that. Staying grounded in the face of chaos requires more courage than losing your temper. It demands discipline to refrain from giving your energy to things that don't serve you. It requires maturity to recognize that not every battle merits your presence, and not every opinion merits your response. When you deeply value yourself, you no longer allow unrestricted access to your emotions. Not everyone deserves to know what wounds you carry, what dreams you hold, or what thoughts occupy your mind. Some people approach you only to drain you, manipulate you, or pull you into their own turbulence. When you don't know your worth, you allow this. When you do, you move differently. You move with intention, set boundaries, and carry a quiet confidence that others can feel, even if they don't fully understand it. Peace is never passive. It is a deliberate choice you make every day. It's choosing not to replay conversations that serve no purpose, refusing to carry guilt that isn't yours, and deciding not to fix people who refuse to fix themselves. Peace is choosing yourself, even when it feels uncomfortable or lonely, even when it disappoints people who benefited from your lack of boundaries. And here's something most people won't tell you. When you start valuing yourself, some people won't like it. They may say you've changed, that you've become distant, or that you are selfish. What they're really reacting to is the fact that you are no longer available for manipulation, disrespect, or being taken for granted. Your growth, your boundaries, and your peace are not up for debate. There's a difference between being kind and being self-sacrificial to the point of harming yourself. You can be loving and still say no. You can forgive and still deny access to those who hurt you. You can have a generous heart without burning yourself to keep others warm. Your emotional well-being is not renewable for those who demand it without care. Consider how much energy has been spent trying to be understood by those who never intended to understand you. How many nights were lost worrying about situations beyond your control? How many times you betrayed your own instincts to maintain an illusion of peace with others? That ends when you decide that nothing, absolutely nothing, is worth compromising your inner calm. Valuing yourself means accepting reality rather than fighting it, ceasing to force connections that don't flow, and no longer chasing closure from people who thrive in confusion. It means choosing what nourishes your spirit over what satisfies someone else's agenda. This is not giving up, it is leveling up. It is wisdom cultivated through experience, through pain, through lessons that transform you into someone who knows better. Valuing yourself doesn't make you immune to pain. It means you don't live in it. It means you feel without letting temporary emotions dictate permanent decisions. You allow yourself to experience, but you refuse to let those feelings drag you back into situations you've worked hard to leave behind. You learn to sit with discomfort without becoming it, to let go without bitterness, to move forward without seeking revenge. There is a rare calm that comes when you stop seeking external validation, a calm that emerges when you trust yourself enough to walk alone if necessary, a calm that comes from realizing silence is sometimes the most profound statement of self-respect. Once you feel this calm, once you understand what it is to be at peace with yourself, you won't willingly trade it for chaos again. The world will always test you. People will try to provoke you, situations will attempt to pull you from your center, but when you value yourself deeply, you no longer react from ego or insecurity. You respond from alignment, from clarity. You attract rather than chase. You decide rather than beg. Life feels lighter, not because everything is perfect, but because you are no longer at war with yourself. You stop needing to win arguments to be right, to prove your worth to those blind to it. You stop attempting to control outcomes and instead focus on controlling your responses. This is a new way of living, a way where peace is prioritized and energy is protected as the precious resource it is. Valuing yourself is not a luxury, it is a necessity. Once it becomes part of your being, you start to notice how much of life was driven by reaction rather than intention, how often choices were made out of fear of loss, judgment, or isolation. That awareness can initially feel heavy, uncomfortable even, as you confront the times you abandoned yourself for the sake of external peace. But that discomfort is not punishment, it is awakening. Clarity always precedes transformation. When you deeply value yourself, you stop living on autopilot. You no longer allow others' moods to dictate your day or their disrespect to masquerade as honesty. You become deliberate about who receives your time, attention, and energy because every moment is finite. When you give your energy to chaos, arguments, or people who drain you, you are literally giving away pieces of your life. Peace feels rare because it demands boundaries, and boundaries demand courage. The courage to say no without justification, to leave without closure, to choose solitude over harmful company. Most people are intelligent enough, but they lack the courage to protect themselves emotionally. They know what hurts them but keep returning. They know what drains them but continue entertaining it. Valuing yourself deeply is deciding that you will no longer do this. Strength is not measured by volume or visibility. The strongest are often the calmest. They do not need to prove anything. They can sit in silence without feeling threatened. They understand that reacting surrenders power, whereas restraint retains it. Valuing yourself allows you to maintain control, to let others rage while you stay anchored. This does not mean detachment from life. It means selectivity. It means distinguishing chaos from passion and intensity from love. Real love feels safe. Real connection feels calm. Alignment doesn't trigger anxiety when something consistently costs your peace. It isn't love, it's a lesson. Lessons are meant to teach, not to be dwelled on forever. When you value yourself, you trust your intuition over external opinions. You listen to that quiet inner voice that signals when something is off. You stop gaslighting yourself into believing disrespect is normal or that your feelings are inconvenient. Emotions are guidance, not weaknesses. They alert you, not bind you. Emotional self-control brings dignity. Choosing calm over conflict brings grace. Knowing you don't need to attend every argument cultivates confidence. The more you practice this, the more natural it becomes, and the more anchored you feel in a world that constantly demands your attention. You stop confusing drama with meaningful connection and chaos with engagement. You stop allowing manipulation or entitlement to dictate your boundaries. You learn to let go without bitterness, to forgive without losing yourself, to protect your energy as the finite and vital resource it is. Once you embrace this, your presence becomes intentional, your actions deliberate, and your life begins to align with the clarity and peace you fought to preserve. Every choice becomes measured, every relationship evaluated, every moment of emotional labor weighed against your well-being. You no longer scatter your energy to satisfy those unwilling to respect it. You cease to be a caretaker of people's moods at the cost of your own stability. You realize that self-value is a form of protection, a compass guiding you through the storms of life. The calm that arises from this understanding is profound. It is not fragile, but resilient. It does not bend to chaos, nor does it yield to pressure. It is steady, quiet, and unshakable. You begin to see that valuing yourself deeply is not about isolation, but about discernment. It's about preserving the sanctity of your inner life, about choosing relationships, engagements, and endeavors that contribute rather than deplete. It's about living intentionally rather than reacting compulsively. And as this clarity solidifies, you understand that peace is a practice, a constant decision, and a daily commitment. Every moment of self-restraint, every boundary enforced, every instance where you choose calm over argument strengthens your inner foundation. The world may continue to test you, provoke you, and challenge your center, but when you value yourself deeply, you remain anchored. You respond, you don't react. You preserve, you don't squander. You align, you don't chase. And in this alignment, a profound liberation emerges. A life not defined by external chaos, but by the peace cultivated and protected within you. You start responding instead of reacting, observing instead of absorbing, understanding instead of engaging. Gradually, your life becomes quieter, not empty, but filled with peace. People will test you when they sense this transformation. They will probe your boundaries. They may try to provoke old versions of you. They might say things they know would have triggered you before, not because you did anything wrong, but because they miss the access they once had. And that's when your true growth is revealed, not in how loudly you assert yourself, but in how calmly you uphold your standards. Valuing yourself deeply also means letting go of the idea that struggle must be romanticized. You stop believing that suffering is a prerequisite for growth. Growth can be gentle. Healing can be calm. Success doesn't need to come at the expense of your energy. Peace doesn't need to be earned through exhaustion. Sometimes the bravest act is to rest. Sometimes the most powerful move is to step back and breathe. You don't owe everyone your story. You don't owe everyone your vulnerability. Some people only seek your pain to feel superior, to gossip, or to reassure themselves that you aren't thriving. Valuing yourself means discerning who is safe with your truth. It means realizing that privacy is protection, not secrecy. As you embrace this mindset, you'll notice a shift in your relationships. Some connections will fade, some will break, others will strengthen in surprising ways. That is not loss, that is alignment. Life rearranges itself to match the version of you that finally knows your worth. Don't resist it. Don't cling to what's leaving. Make space for what respects you. There is a quiet confidence that emerges from knowing you can stand alone, from knowing that your value doesn't diminish because someone else fails to see it. That confidence is unshakable because it is rooted internally, not dependent on applause or external validation. When you stop chasing peace outside yourself, it begins to find you. Situations resolve without force. People reveal themselves without confrontation. Answers arrive without obsession. Life starts to flow instead of resist, not because the world changed, but because you did. You begin to understand that silence is not emptiness. It is space. Space to think clearly, to heal properly, to hear yourself again. In that space, you reconnect with who you are beneath the noise, beneath the expectations, beneath the pressure to be everything for everyone else. Valuing yourself deeply is returning home to yourself after years of being everywhere else. It is choosing inner stability over external approval. It is realizing that your peace is your responsibility. No one else can safeguard it for you. Once you truly grasp this truth, your approach to life becomes unrecognizable from who you used to be. You stop negotiating with people who only respect you when convenient. You stop shrinking your truth to fit into spaces never meant for it. You stop over-explaining decisions to people who already decided your worth before you even spoke. That's when something powerful happens. You feel lighter, not because life became easy, but because you stopped carrying what was never yours to carry. There was a version of you trained to tolerate too much, to be patient with disrespect, to confuse endurance with strength, to believe understanding required silence about your own pain. That version survived, but it suffered quietly. Survival is not living. Valuing yourself deeply means you no longer accept survival as your standard. You raise the bar. You choose peace over proving loyalty. You choose clarity over chaos. You begin to recognize that not every emotional reaction requires a response. Some things are better met with distance. Some conversations are better left unfinished. Some doors are better closed without explanation. Closure is not always verbal. It can be a conscious decision. A decision to stop returning to what breaks you, to stop reopening wounds, just to remember why they hurt. When you value yourself, you stop asking, why did they do this to me? And start asking, why did I allow this for so long? Not from self-blame, but from empowerment. Recognizing your role restores control. You cease seeing yourself as a victim of circumstance and start seeing yourself as the architect of your future boundaries. Peace comes at a cost. Some people will leave. Familiarity may disappear. Relationships built on your over-availability, over-forgiveness, or over-accommodation may crumble. But the return is priceless. You gain self-respect, emotional stability, a life no longer dictated by constant negotiation or draining obligations. Your spirit signals what serves you and what does not. That tightness in your chest, that heaviness after certain interactions, the anxiety before some conversations, these are signs. Valuing yourself deeply means listening to those signals, not ignoring them to be polite. You stop sacrificing your well-being to maintain appearances. You honor what your intuition and body tell you. Peace does not mean the absence of conflict. It means the absence of internal conflict. You are no longer torn between who you are and who others want you to be. Your actions align with your values. You sleep more soundly because you aren't betraying yourself during the day. Being unbothered carries power, not because you don't care, but because you care enough about yourself to remain undisturbed. You stop internalizing other people's projections. You realize that someone's inability to treat you well reflects their capacity, not your worth. Valuing yourself changes your speech. You speak intentionally. You stop saying yes when you mean no. You stop apologizing unnecessarily. You stop over-explaining boundaries that should be obvious. Your words become calm, deliberate, firm, never aggressive, never defensive, simply grounded. This path can feel lonely. When you stop tolerating nonsense, your circle shrinks. When you stop chasing validation, the noise quiets. That solitude may feel like loneliness, but it is not the absence of people. It is the absence of alignment. Temporary solitude is far healthier than perpetual emotional exhaustion. In this space, you rebuild your relationship with yourself. You act for your own nourishment, not for approval. You enjoy your own company. You trust your own decisions. You find peace and simplicity. You realize you were never missing anything. You were disconnected from yourself. You discover the strength of restraint, the authority of calmness, the respect commanded by silence rooted in self-respect, not fear. You stop reacting impulsively. You give yourself time. You respond from center, not from trigger. That alone changes outcomes dramatically. People may misunderstand you, judge you, or talk, but it no longer shakes you. Your sense of self becomes unshakable. You no longer seek validation where you must abandon yourself. You stop craving acceptance from those who can't even accept themselves. You stop explaining your growth to people who profit from your stagnation. Gradually, you feel pride, not for achievements, but for what you refuse to tolerate. This pride is humble, grateful, and grounded in awareness. Every lesson, every loss, every uncomfortable moment shaped you into someone who knows better, someone who chooses peace not because it's simple, but because it is essential. The more you value yourself, the clearer it becomes. Nothing is worth losing your peace for. Not arguments, misunderstandings, attention, validation, or people who show up only for convenience. Once this truth settles, life shifts. You move with quiet authority. Your presence and energy transform. Boundaries are felt, not announced. Departures happen without warning, explanations, or guilt. And as you stop explaining yourself, a deep exhale emerges. Years of unnoticed tension loosen, and your life begins to breathe freely again. You start recognizing patterns faster. You notice when someone only reaches out when they need something. You notice when respect disappears the moment you stop being useful. You notice when conversations feel one-sided, when support feels conditional, when affection feels transactional. Instead of questioning your worth, you start questioning the alignment. That shift alone saves you years of unnecessary pain. Valuing yourself deeply teaches you that emotional availability is not the same as emotional accessibility. You can be compassionate without being an open door. You can listen without absorbing. You can care without carrying. And the moment you grasp that distinction, you stop drowning in other people's problems while neglecting your own healing. There is a strength in being centered that nothing can replace. When you are centered, insults don't penetrate. Provocations don't hook you. Manipulation loses its power because manipulation only works on those who doubt themselves. Once you've done the inner work, faced your fears, insecurities, and wounds, there's nothing left for anyone to pull on. You stop chasing explanations. You stop needing closure from people who only know how to leave messes behind. You accept that some will never give you the accountability you deserve. Instead of waiting, you free yourself. Freedom doesn't always come with answers. Sometimes it comes with acceptance. Acceptance that you don't need to understand everything to move forward. When you value yourself deeply, you stop romanticizing the past. You stop glorifying versions of people who no longer exist. You stop holding on to memories that keep you emotionally stuck. You honor what was without letting it define what will be. You take the lessons, keep the growth, and release attachment. Your standards rise naturally, not from ego, but from self-awareness. You stop tolerating inconsistency. You stop settling for crumbs. You stop accepting words without actions. Your life begins to reflect your self-respect. You attract calmer conversations, healthier dynamics, more honest connections, not because you demanded them, but because you aligned with them. Peace doesn't mean numbness. It means emotional maturity. It means feeling deeply without letting feelings control you. It means allowing sadness without letting it become your identity. It means experiencing anger without letting it dictate your behavior. You feel everything, but you choose what gets to stay. When you value yourself deeply, you no longer rush healing. You let it unfold at its own pace. You don't shame yourself for still hurting. You don't pressure yourself to be over it to appear strong. True strength is patient. It doesn't need to perform. It doesn't need to rush. It knows where it is going. You stop measuring your worth by productivity or usefulness. You realize you don't have to earn rest. You don't have to justify slowing down. You don't have to be exhausted to be valuable. Your existence alone has meaning. That understanding transforms how you treat your body, your mind, and your time. The more you protect your peace, the more clarity you gain. The more clarity you have, the easier decisions become. You no longer overthink what feels wrong. You no longer second guess what feels right. You trust yourself. Trusting yourself is one of the rarest forms of confidence. People who thrive on drama will fade away. Those who only connect through chaos will lose interest. And that is okay. You are not here to entertain dysfunction. You are here to build a life that feels good from the inside out. You stop reacting to disrespect and start responding with distance. You stop arguing with ignorance and start investing in growth. You stop proving your worth and start preserving your peace. Gradually, the noise around you begins to quiet, not because the world changed, but because you did. You begin to see how much time was wasted trying to be chosen by those who weren't even choosing themselves, how much love poured into spaces that couldn't hold it, how often you dimmed your light to avoid making others uncomfortable. Instead of regretting it, you forgive yourself. You were doing the best you could with what you knew at the time. Now you know better, and knowing better changes everything. You become more present, intentional, grounded. You don't rush conversations. You don't rush decisions. You don't rush healing. You move at a pace that honors your nervous system, your values, and your peace. Life begins to feel less like survival and more like alignment, less like chaos and more like clarity, less like noise and more like purpose. When you value yourself deeply, you don't just protect your peace, you become it. Everything you allow, everything you accept, everything you choose begins to reflect a higher standard. You begin to understand that protecting your peace isn't selfish, it's responsible. It's owning your emotional life instead of handing the keys to anyone who shows up. Your nervous system remembers everything your mind tries to forgive. Once you respect that, you stop forcing yourself into environments, conversations, and relationships your spirit has already rejected. You stop rushing to reply. You stop feeling compelled to defend yourself in every situation. You stop explaining your intentions to people committed to misunderstanding you. A calm emerges, solid, grounded, unshaken, independent of approval or agreement. Valuing yourself deeply means stopping internalization of disrespect as something you need to fix. Some people treat you poorly, not because of who you are, but because of who they are. That realization frees you. You stop asking what you did wrong and start asking whether this environment deserves your presence at all. You become more honest with yourself. You stop pretending nothing bothers you when it does. You stop minimizing your pain to appear strong. You stop calling self-abandonment patience or emotional neglect loyalty. You tell yourself the truth, and truth, even when uncomfortable, always brings you closer to peace. There is a quiet grief that comes with growth. Grief for time lost, for versions of yourself that didn't know better, for relationships you outgrew but once loved. Instead of fleeing from it, you sit with it. You let it teach and soften you without breaking you. Growth doesn't harden, it refines. You learn to pause before reacting, breathe before responding, observe before engaging. In that pause, you regain control. Most conflicts don't require your energy. Provocations lose power when unacknowledged. People reveal themselves clearly when you stop interrupting with reaction. Valuing yourself deeply changes your relationship with disappointment. You stop taking it as a personal failure. You understand that placing expectations on the wrong people always leads to heartbreak. You raise your discernment rather than lowering your standards. You become selective about who you trust, rely on, and open up to. You enjoy simplicity, peaceful mornings, quiet evenings, honest conversations, unforced laughter. You stop chasing intensity and start appreciating stability. You stop confusing emotional roller coasters with connection. Real alignment feels calm, steady, and safe, not chaotic, draining, or confusing. Your self-talk transforms. You stop criticizing yourself for needing rest. You stop shaming yourself for boundaries. You stop replaying mistakes as evidence of inadequacy. You speak to yourself with the same compassion once reserved for everyone else. That inner relationship becomes the foundation of your peace. You stop waiting for apologies that may never come. You stop expecting others to become self-aware or provide closure. Healing is internal. Peace is an internal commitment. You no longer fear being alone. You fear being in the wrong company. Silence is preferred over disrespect, solitude over chaos. That choice doesn't isolate, it protects and clears space for healthier connections to find you. You notice how much stronger you've become, not in how much you endure, but in how much you refuse to endure. You don't tolerate emotional games, engage in power struggles, or compete for attention. You simply step back, and stepping back often becomes the most powerful move you can make. Peace becomes your compass. When something threatens it, you pay attention. When something nurtures it, you lean in. You stop rationalizing discomfort. You stop making excuses for repeating patterns. You trust yourself enough to walk away early instead of staying long enough to be hurt again. You also learn that forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation. You can release resentment without reopening doors. You can wish someone well without granting them access. Forgiveness is about freeing yourself, not giving someone another opportunity to hurt you. As you continue on this path, you notice that your life feels less reactive and more intentional. You choose your battles wisely. You invest your energy where it matters. You stop trying to control outcomes and start focusing on alignment, and alignment naturally brings peace. You begin to feel anchored, not because life stopped challenging you, but because you respond differently. You don't panic as easily. You don't spiral as often. You don't lose yourself in temporary emotions. You remain centered even when circumstances feel uncertain. That is the power of valuing yourself deeply. It doesn't make you untouchable, it makes you unshakable. Once your peace becomes non-negotiable, everything else in your life begins to settle into its rightful place. You start to see that your previous reactions were your biggest vulnerability, and now restraint has become your greatest strength. You don't feel the need to respond immediately. You don't feel pressured to explain yourself. You don't feel compelled to correct every misunderstanding. You recognize that clarity doesn't always come through words. Sometimes it comes through distance, sometimes through consistency, sometimes through silence. Valuing yourself deeply teaches you that access to you is a privilege, not a given. Just because someone has history with you doesn't mean they deserve a future with you. Just because someone knows your past doesn't mean they are entitled to your present. Internalizing that stops you from reopening doors that life already closed for a reason. You feel more grounded in who you are. Your identity no longer shifts based on the people around you. You don't shrink to be accepted. You don't amplify yourself to be noticed. You don't harden to be respected. You remain steady, composed, authentic, and the right people recognize that without you performing. There comes a moment when you realize how much peace you sacrificed for people who wouldn't sacrifice inconvenience for you. That realization can sting, it can bring sadness, but it also brings liberation because now you know, and knowing ensures you don't repeat the same cycle. You stop romanticizing effort that isn't reciprocated. You stop applauding inconsistency just because it appears occasionally. You stop mistaking potential for progress. You learn that consistency is the true measure of respect. Anything that disrupts your peace repeatedly shows you exactly where it belongs, outside your inner circle. Your nervous system calms. You are no longer bracing for disappointment. You are not walking on eggshells. You are not overanalyzing tone, timing, or messages. You are present, you are relaxed, you are at ease. That state of calm becomes your new baseline. You stop chasing emotional highs to feel alive. You don't need drama to feel important. You don't need chaos to feel connected. You don't need conflict to feel seen. You discover that peace is not dull, it is nourishing. It restores you, it sharpens your focus, it brings clarity. Valuing yourself deeply reshapes how you handle criticism. You listen when it is constructive. You dismiss it when it is projection. You don't internalize opinions from those who don't understand your journey. You don't allow external noise to drown out your inner voice. You trust your path even when others don't comprehend it. You also cultivate patience, not with disrespect, but with life itself. You understand that growth takes time, healing unfolds gradually, and alignment doesn't happen instantly. Instead of forcing outcomes, you allow things to develop naturally. You show up, you do your part, you release the rest. A subtle confidence grows within you, not loud, not performative, but felt. It comes from knowing you can handle whatever arises without losing yourself. It comes from having your own back, no matter what. You stop seeking external permission to be yourself. You stop waiting for validation to pursue what matters. You stop doubting decisions because others question them. You move forward with quiet certainty, trusting that alignment will reveal itself in time. Your standards become unshakable. You don't bend them to avoid discomfort. You don't lower them to avoid loneliness. You don't compromise them to keep people around. You understand that peace achieved through self-betrayal is not real peace. You also learn to let moments pass without attaching stories. Someone's mood doesn't ruin your day. Someone's opinion doesn't define your worth. Someone's absence doesn't signal rejection. You stop personalizing everything. You observe, accept, and move forward. The more you value yourself, the more selective you become with your time. You invest in what nourishes you: growth, creativity, rest, meaningful connections. You stop scattering your energy. You stop being everywhere for everyone. You choose depth over quantity, alignment over approval. Inner peace is built through daily choices: what you say yes to, what you say no to, what you tolerate, and what you release. Every time you choose yourself, you reinforce that peace. A sense of wholeness settles in. You no longer wait for someone to complete you. You no longer seek external fixes for internal imbalance. You feel grounded, complete, not perfect. From this place, your life begins to reflect your inner stability. Decisions are clearer, relationships healthier, mind quieter, heart lighter. When you truly value yourself, you no longer chase peace, you live from it. Even your silence changes. It is no longer heavy or tense. It is calm, intentional, grounded. You are not silent from fear. You are silent because you no longer need to prove anything. You realize clarity doesn't come from convincing others. It comes from being clear with yourself. That inner clarity becomes louder than any argument you could ever win. Valuing yourself deeply teaches discernment. You notice the difference between someone having a bad day and someone displaying a recurring pattern. You stop excusing repeated behavior just because you understand someone's pain. Empathy no longer overrides self-respect. You can acknowledge struggles without volunteering to be collateral damage in unresolved issues. You stop confusing familiarity with safety. Just because something feels familiar doesn't make it healthy. Just because you've known someone long doesn't entitle them to unlimited access. You choose what feels right over what feels known. That choice, while uncomfortable at first, opens space for better to enter your life. A deep peace arises from knowing you don't have to react to everything. Not every comment requires correction. Not every action demands confrontation. You understand that people reveal themselves when you allow them to act without interruption. Instead of exhausting yourself managing perceptions, you let truth unfold naturally. You stop fearing disappointment. You realize disappointing others is often the cost of not betraying yourself. Guilt loses its grip. You stop living for approval and begin living in alignment. You no longer feel responsible for managing other people's emotions at your own expense. Valuing yourself deeply also means you stop revisiting painful places to prove you've healed. You don't test strength by reopening wounds. You honor progress by protecting it. You no longer return to environments that demanded a version of yourself that no longer exists. You become present in your own life. You notice small moments of calm previously overlooked, the relief of not being misunderstood, the comfort of not explaining yourself, the freedom of not chasing validation. These moments accumulate, and peace becomes your default rather than your exception. You start trusting timing instead of forcing outcomes. You understand what is meant to stay will stay without manipulation. What is meant to leave will leave regardless of effort. Instead of resisting change, you allow it to teach you. You let go without resentment. You move forward without fear. A deep humility emerges with self-worth. You stop needing to be right all the time. You stop competing for attention. You stop comparing your journey to others. You understand everyone carries something. You no longer prove strength by bearing more than your share. You learn to sit with yourself, truly sit, with no distraction, no noise, no performance. In that stillness, you reconnect with who you are beyond expectations, beyond roles, beyond survival. That reconnection becomes the foundation of your peace. You also learn that forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation. You can release resentment without reopening doors. You can wish someone well without granting them access. Forgiveness is about freeing yourself, not offering someone another chance to hurt you. As you continue down this path, your life becomes less reactive and more intentional. You choose your battles wisely. You invest your energy where it matters. You stop trying to control outcomes and start focusing on alignment. And alignment naturally brings peace. You begin to feel anchored, not because life stopped testing you, but because you respond differently. You don't panic as easily. You don't spiral as often. You don't lose yourself in fleeting emotions. You remain centered even when circumstances feel unstable. That is the power of valuing yourself deeply. It doesn't make you untouchable, it makes you unshakable. Once your peace becomes non-negotiable, everything else begins to fall into place. You start to see that your previous reactions were weaknesses, and now restraint is your greatest strength. You don't feel the need to respond immediately. You don't feel pressured to explain yourself. You don't feel compelled to correct every misunderstanding. You recognize that clarity doesn't always come through words. Sometimes it comes through distance, sometimes through consistency, sometimes through silence. Valuing yourself deeply teaches you that access to you is a privilege, not a right. Just because someone has history with you doesn't mean they deserve a future with you. Just because someone knows your past doesn't mean they're entitled to your present. Internalizing that stops you from reopening doors that life already closed for a reason. You feel more grounded in who you are. Your identity no longer shifts based on who surrounds you. You don't shrink to be accepted. You don't amplify yourself to be noticed. You don't harden to be respected. You remain steady, composed, authentic. And the right people recognize that without you performing. There comes a moment when you realize how much peace you sacrificed for people unwilling to sacrifice inconvenience for you. That realization can sting, it can bring sadness, but it also brings liberation, because now you know, and knowing ensures you don't repeat the same cycle. You stop romanticizing effort that isn't reciprocated. You stop applauding inconsistency simply because it appears occasionally. You stop mistaking potential for progress. You learn that consistency is the true measure of respect. Anything that disrupts your peace repeatedly shows you exactly where it belongs. Outside your inner circle, your nervous system calms. You are no longer bracing for disappointment. You are not walking on eggshells. You are not overanalyzing tone, timing, or messages. You are present, you are relaxed, you are at ease. That state of calm becomes your new baseline. You stop chasing emotional highs to feel alive. You don't need drama to feel important. You don't need chaos to feel connected. You don't need conflict to feel heard. You discover that peace is not dull, it is nourishing. It restores you. It sharpens your focus. It brings clarity. Valuing yourself deeply reshapes how you handle criticism. You listen when it is constructive. You dismiss it when it is projection. You don't internalize opinions from those who don't know your journey. You don't allow external noise to drown out your inner voice. You trust your path, even when others fail to understand it. You cultivate patience, not with disrespect, but with life itself. You understand that growth takes time, healing unfolds gradually, and alignment doesn't happen instantly. Instead of forcing outcomes, you allow things to develop naturally. You show up, you do your part, you release the rest. A subtle confidence grows within you, not loud, not performative, but deeply felt. It comes from knowing you can handle whatever arises without losing yourself. It comes from having your own back, no matter what. You stop seeking external permission to be yourself. You stop waiting for validation to pursue what matters. You stop doubting decisions because others question them. You move forward with quiet certainty, trusting that alignment will reveal itself in time. Your standards become unshakable. You don't bend them to avoid discomfort. You don't lower them to avoid loneliness. You don't compromise them to keep people around. You understand that peace achieved through self-betrayal is not real peace. You also learn to let moments pass without attaching stories. Someone's mood doesn't ruin your day. Someone's opinion doesn't define your worth. Someone's absence doesn't signal rejection. You stop personalizing everything. You observe, accept, and move forward. The more you value yourself, the more selective you become with your time. You invest in what nourishes you. Growth, creativity, rest, meaningful connections. You stop scattering your energy. You stop being everywhere for everyone. You choose depth over quantity, alignment over approval. Inner peace is built through daily choices, what you say yes to, what you say no to, what you tolerate, and what you release. Every time you choose yourself, you reinforce that peace. A sense of wholeness settles in. You no longer wait for someone to complete you. You no longer seek external fixes for internal imbalance. You feel grounded, complete, not perfect. From this place, your life begins to reflect your inner stability. Decisions are clearer, relationships healthier, mind quieter, heart lighter. When you truly value yourself, you no longer chase peace, you live from it. Even your silence changes. It is no longer heavy or tense. It is calm, intentional, grounded. You are not silent from fear. You are silent because you no longer need to prove anything. You realize clarity doesn't come from convincing others. It comes from being clear with yourself. That inner clarity becomes louder than any argument you could ever win. Valuing yourself deeply teaches discernment. You notice the difference between someone having a bad day and someone displaying a recurring pattern. You stop excusing repeated behavior simply because you understand someone's pain. Empathy no longer overrides self-respect. You can acknowledge struggles without volunteering to be collateral damage in unresolved issues. You stop confusing familiarity with safety. Just because something feels familiar doesn't make it healthy. Just because you've known someone long doesn't entitle them to unlimited access. You choose what feels right over what feels known. That choice, while uncomfortable at first, opens space for something better to enter your life. A deep peace arises from knowing you don't have to react to everything. Not every comment requires correction. Not every action demands confrontation. You understand that people reveal themselves when you allow them to act without interruption. Instead of exhausting yourself managing perceptions, you let truth unfold naturally. You stop fearing disappointment. You realize disappointing others is often the cost of not betraying yourself. Guilt loses its grip. You stop living for approval and begin living in alignment. You no longer feel responsible for managing other people's emotions at your own expense. Valuing yourself deeply also means you stop revisiting painful places to prove you've healed. You don't test strength by reopening wounds. You honor progress by protecting it. You no longer return to environments that demanded a version of yourself that no longer exists. You become present in your own life. You notice small moments of calm previously overlooked, the relief of not being misunderstood, the comfort of not explaining yourself, the freedom of not chasing validation. These moments accumulate and peace becomes your default rather than your exception. You start trusting timing instead of forcing outcomes. You understand what is meant to stay will stay without manipulation. What is meant to leave will leave regardless of effort. Instead of resisting change, you allow it to teach you. You let go without resentment. You move forward without fear. A deep humility emerges with self-worth. You stop needing to be right all the time. You stop competing for attention. You stop comparing your journey to others. You understand everyone carries something. You no longer prove strength by bearing more than your share. You learn to sit with yourself, truly sit, with no distraction, no noise, no performance. In that stillness, you reconnect with who you are beyond expectations, beyond roles, beyond survival. That reconnection becomes the foundation of your peace. Valuing yourself deeply reshapes how you love. You love without attachment to outcomes. You give without losing yourself. You care without controlling. You understand that love should expand you, not shrink you. Anything that requires abandoning yourself to stay connected is misaligned with who you are becoming. You stop rushing to label connections. You don't need to define everything immediately. You allow things to reveal themselves. You trust observation over assumption. You let actions speak. This patience protects you from entanglements that once drained you. Your confidence becomes quiet but undeniable. You don't need to broadcast boundaries, they're felt. You don't need to assert your worth. It's evident in how you move. You don't need to defend your peace. You simply choose it again and again. You stop mistaking endurance for loyalty. Loyalty to others means nothing if it costs your loyalty to yourself. You no longer stay where you are consistently disrespected, dismissed, or depleted. You also learn walking away doesn't require drama. Sometimes it's silent, subtle, or just a shift in access. That quiet withdrawal is often more powerful than confrontation. Your emotional world becomes stable. You're not easily shaken. You don't spiral or catastrophize. You remain steady in uncertainty, not numb, but grounded. Peace becomes resilient, carried regardless of circumstances, growing stronger as you honor it. Each decision from self-respect instead of fear shifts life quietly toward alignment. Your mind feels lighter, no replaying old conversations, no rehearsing arguments, no imagining explanations for people who stopped listening. Thoughts slow, breath deepens, inner world becomes refuge. You stop living in anticipation of disappointment. You don't brace before interactions. You trust your ability to handle whatever comes. Fear loosens its grip when you won't abandon yourself again. You recognize emotional bait, provocation, subtle disrespect, attempts to pull you into old patterns. Instead of reacting, you observe. You let moments pass. Restraint confuses those used to control via emotional reactions, but you remain aligned, not for understanding, but for integrity. You stop over-explaining boundaries. You act in accordance with what feels right. Consistency makes words unnecessary. You no longer need proof for your pain or witnesses for your healing. Internal validation becomes unshakable. Moments end without dragging them forward. Bad interactions don't define days. Disappointments don't ruin weeks. Emotional fluidity keeps you free. You notice how peace affects your body. Shoulders relax, jaw unclenches, stomach softens, sleep improves, movement slows, listening sharpens. Your body rests because your mind is no longer at war. You stop forcing connection. You stop reviving energy that no longer flows. You stop believing effort alone fixes misalignment. You understand some things fall apart not because you didn't try hard enough, but because they weren't meant to last in the form imagined. Courage emerges in letting things end without bitterness, allowing people to misjudge you, walking away without demanding understanding. That courage strengthens peace, rooted in acceptance rather than resistance. You learn to enjoy life without an audience. Not every moment is for others. Some growth is private, and that privacy protects what you're building. Joy becomes quieter, steadier, sustainable, not reliant on highs or external approval. You accept others as they are and decide accordingly. No resentment, no bitterness, just clarity. Success is measured by alignment, honesty, calmness, and consistency. You respond from healed awareness rather than old wounds. Triggers don't hit, patterns don't pull you in, fears don't control choices. Peace means choosing growth over chaos, having hard conversations when necessary without entertaining needless conflict. You become more compassionate because you understand more, not because you tolerate more. You see clearly, which allows wiser movement. Life isn't perfect, but it becomes honest, and honesty brings peace. You stop lying to yourself about what hurts or drains you. Your spirit breathes. That breath builds trust in yourself, your timing, and the process of becoming. You move forward in quiet confidence, not fear, knowing you'll meet whatever comes without sacrificing what matters most. Peace is built deliberately, brick by brick, choice by choice. Every act of truth, rest, or non-engagement lays another brick. Slowly, you construct a life safe inside, no matter the outside. You handle uncertainty differently. You don't panic when clarity is absent. You don't rush control. You don't cling to people or situations for temporary reassurance. You understand that clarity often comes after patience. You replace fear with trust in your resilience, discernment, and ability to adapt. Urgency no longer dictates decisions. Messages don't demand instant replies. Problems don't require immediate solutions. Feelings don't need instant action. Space allows reflection, processing, and intentional responses. Wisdom emerges. You stop romanticizing suffering as proof of depth. Pain doesn't make you authentic. Chaos doesn't make you passionate. Depth comes from awareness, presence, and honest self-confrontation without drowning. That depth brings peace, not turmoil. You are less reactive to praise or criticism. Compliments don't inflate ego. Criticism doesn't dismantle confidence. You listen but remain anchored. Emotional steadiness builds quiet authority. You allow moments to remain incomplete, Not every story needs conclusion. Not every relationship needs final words. Not every misunderstanding needs resolution. Peace sometimes comes from letting life close chapters naturally. You stop trying to be everything to everyone. You protect yourself, you preserve energy, you live aligned, anchored, and quietly powerful. You accept that you will be misunderstood, that you will be misjudged, that some people will project their insecurities onto you, and instead of defending your character, you live in alignment with it. Your consistency becomes your answer. You begin to experience time differently. Days feel fuller, not because they're busier, but because they are calmer. You're present for small moments you once rushed past. A quiet morning, a deep breath, a pause of stillness. These moments become anchors, reminders that peace thrives in simplicity, not in constant motion. Valuing yourself deeply changes how you approach conflict. You don't avoid it out of fear, but you don't seek it unnecessarily either. You address issues that truly matter. You speak when needed, and when it isn't necessary, you allow silence to do the work. You understand that consciously chosen silence is not avoidance, it is discernment. You stop believing that everyone must understand you to validate your existence. You stop over-explaining your intentions. You stop performing your growth for an audience. You trust that those aligned with you will feel it intuitively, not question it. There's a softness that develops alongside your strength. You're not hardened by what you've endured. You're refined. You approach life gently, yet you're no longer fragile. You bend without breaking. You care without collapsing. You love without losing yourself. Valuing yourself deeply allows you to forgive your past without rewriting it. You don't minimize what happened. You don't rationalize the pain. You simply acknowledge that it shaped you, and then you choose growth beyond it. That acceptance frees you from carrying old weight into new seasons. You stop seeking distractions to avoid being alone with your thoughts. You're comfortable in your own presence. You don't require constant stimulation to feel whole. You can sit in silence and feel complete. That ability to be at peace with yourself is one of the highest forms of self-respect. You notice how your priorities evolve. You care less about appearances and more about alignment, less about approval and more about fulfillment, less about being liked and more about being true. Those shifts quietly transform your life. Valuing yourself deeply doesn't isolate you from others. It aligns you with the right people. Conversations feel easier, connections feel safer, energy becomes mutual. You no longer have to overexert to feel understood. Even when life challenges you, as it inevitably will, you face difficulties from a place of internal stability. You don't collapse under pressure. You don't lose yourself in fear. You remain anchored because you know who you are, what you value, and what you are no longer willing to compromise. You move forward with patience, clarity, and quiet conviction, carrying your peace as a deeply rooted guide for every step you take. You begin to see that peace is not fragile like glass, it is resilient like muscle. The more you exercise it, the stronger it grows. Every choice of restraint over reaction, understanding over assumption, self-respect over self-betrayal strengthens it. Situations that once shook you no longer register the same way. Not because you no longer care, but because you care differently now. Valuing yourself deeply means you stop living in emotional stagnation. You no longer pay interest on old hurts, regrets, or conversations that should have ended years ago. You clear those accounts, you forgive when necessary, and release when overdue. Emotional freedom creates space to breathe, reflect, and move forward unencumbered by the past. You begin to trust stillness. You no longer equate movement with progress. Sometimes the most productive action is pause, reflection, and recalibration. You stop filling silence with noise just to feel busy. You allow moments to remain quiet, and in that quiet, clarity rises. Valuing yourself deeply also reshapes how you approach mistakes, yours and others. You no longer weaponize them. You don't punish yourself endlessly. You don't punish others to feel empowered. You learn, adjust, and grow. Growth requires grace, not cruelty, and that understanding softens you without making you weak. You stop romanticizing potential in people. You see who they are now, not who they could be if they healed, changed, or tried harder. You stop falling in love with promises and start respecting patterns. Awareness protects your peace more effectively than any confrontation. A calm confidence emerges when you know you can walk away and remain okay. When your sense of self doesn't collapse without someone else's presence. When your worth isn't diminished by the absence of validation. That confidence isn't loud, it's grounded. It doesn't seek attention, it commands respect. You begin responding instead of reacting. Even in tension, you allow emotions to be felt, acknowledged, and then guide your actions consciously. That pause between feeling and action becomes one of your most potent strengths. Valuing yourself deeply also means you stop chasing explanations for behavior that has already revealed its truth. You don't analyze every detail to avoid pain. You don't intellectualize discomfort to escape acceptance. Clarity alone becomes sufficient. That acceptance accelerates peace more than understanding ever could. You begin to live from the inside out rather than the outside in. Your mood is no longer dictated by circumstances. Your confidence no longer depends on outcomes. Your peace is independent of others' actions. You become internally regulated, steady, regardless of external conditions. You notice how energy shifts when you stop entertaining what drains you. Creativity returns, motivation sharpens, focus improves. You feel more like your grounded self, not the anxious or exhausted version. You recognize when to engage and when to let go. You stop needing to win arguments to feel valid. You stop proving points at the expense of peace. You understand that being right doesn't always equal alignment. Alignment matters more than ego. You stop waiting for life to be perfect to feel calm. You don't postpone peace until situations resolve. You choose peace in the midst of uncertainty, transition, and growth. Peace becomes practice, not destination. You accept that some people will never meet you where you are. Instead of dragging them along or lowering yourself to reach them, you keep moving. You let distance do what force never could. Life arranges alignment naturally. You appreciate resilience without glorifying pain. You honor progress without identifying with the hurt. You understand your story includes struggle, but it doesn't end there. You are defined not by what you endured, but by how you chose to grow. Valuing yourself deeply shapes how you care for yourself in challenging moments. When tired, unsure, or behind, you don't abandon yourself. You speak with patience. You remind yourself that growth is not linear and healing is not rushed. You stop making decisions from fear of loss. You stop clinging to people, roles, or situations out of fear of the unknown. You trust that what aligns will find you and what doesn't will fall away. A deep sense of inner leadership develops. You guide yourself with wisdom rather than impulse. You prioritize long-term peace over short-term relief. You don't numb discomfort with distraction. You face it, learn from it, and move forward stronger. Life doesn't necessarily become quieter, but you do. You become less reactive, less scattered, less consumed by what you cannot control. You remain centered as the world spins. When committed to protecting peace, you no longer just survive situations, you transcend them. A sense of ownership over your life develops, grounded rather than controlling. You stop blaming circumstances for feelings. You stop handing emotional responsibility to people incapable of handling it. While you can't control everything, you can choose how you relate. That choice becomes your power. Valuing yourself deeply teaches emotional economy. You carefully choose where to invest energy. You no longer invest in conversations that go nowhere, in relationships that drain, in cycles that repeat without growth. Energy spent unwisely costs peace, and peace cannot be replaced. You stop treating discomfort as failure. Discomfort becomes information. It signals when you stretch beyond old limits, when something is misaligned, when adjustments are needed, not quitting. Because you trust yourself, you listen to it rather than suppress it. You respect your instincts. You learn to move with awareness, using each moment as guidance. That trust transforms uncertainty, interactions, and choices, creating a life rooted in self-respect, clarity, and intentionality.